Hello everyone and welcome to Daily News Simplified, your one-stop solution to detailed analysis of current affairs which are published in the daily edition of the Hindu newspaper and are equally relevant for your UPSC preparation. Articles dated 4th of January 2023 are listed on your screen, and the time stamping along with the notes in PDF and Word format are given in the description box below. So let us begin with the first article for the day. This article of the Hindu newspaper appeared on page 14, that is the business page, and says that Indian government is likely to see a cut of $17 billion in its food and fertilizer subsidy in the upcoming budget. Now you must be well aware that on 1st of February this year, like any other year, there is going to be the budget announcements made by the Finance Minister Sita Raman. This year also, government is likely to make the announcement, but this time, government is likely to cut down its subsidy expenditure by about 26%. This is going to be one of the highest cut in the food and fertilizer subsidy. But do not get confused it with the problem of subsidization in the Indian economy. The problems of subsidization has different angle, and this cut is with respect to the higher subsidy that government has paid in the last 2 years. Now in 2021 and 2022, the two financial years have seen the COVID crisis issue. There were large number of people who were drawn into the poverty. They had nothing to eat or survive. Hence, government has to increase the food subsidies given to these hungry people. Not only that, government had to put up the cash transfers in the hand of farmers who were running out of money in order to sustain the agriculture practices. As a result, food and fertilizer subsidy both increased drastically, and government had to put out more money than what it was supposed to do. Now, going by the pre-COVID trend, government is now shifting towards bringing down the subsidy bill on its overall expenditure in the economy in order to control down the fiscal deficit as well as revenue deficit. Now, when we talk about this subsidy, it is an extremely important topic for your prelim examination, as subsidy related questions including the MSP has been asked by the UPSC in the past years. In the mains examination under GS paper 3, that is your economy section, direct and indirect subsidy related questions could be put up. As you can see on the screen, in 2013, a different types of agricultural subsidies given to the farmer was asked, in which you have to classify the subsidy into direct and indirect subsidy and then critically analyze their regime. In 2017, a similar question was asked with respect to the effect of subsidies on the cropping pattern, crop diversity and the economy of Indian farmers. From that perspective, subsidy is an important aspect in your GS paper 3 in the mains examination. So today we are going to analyze about the basics of subsidies, what are direct and indirect subsidies, why government has taken this initiative to reduce down the subsidy bill on its expenditure, what are the basic challenges or the problems that are being faced if we keep on increasing the subsidy bill year on year, what is the basic debate between the subsidy and the public expenditure and what India should follow, and what are the possible way forwards that government can look into in the future in order to reduce down the subsidy bill and bring alternatives. So when we talk about why government has decided to reduce down overall expenditure by 26%, the first thing comes to our mind is that the economy is going through post-COVID recovery. The post-COVID recovery is actually based on what government was supposed to pay in the past 2 financial year. As we have discussed, that people were falling hungry. The people who were working in the unorganized sector, those who had no job security because of the COVID crisis and the nationwide lockdown, had to move from urban centers to their rural counterparts. When they were shifting, they had to survive on food. There was no food to eat and they had no money in the pocket. And that is the reason government came up with so much of subsidized food that they have provided at a very minimum rate or even at the free of cost manner. And because of that, people were brought out of the poverty burden. Now the COVID has ended. Now people are shifting back to the urban areas. They are getting into the regular employment opportunities. Some of them even have got the long-term employment opportunity. Now, as they have shifted out from the rural areas, majority of them now have to survive in the urban areas through their employment opportunities. And once this is gaining the currency, the government is now deciding to reduce down the food subsidy that it was providing previously. Government, which has launched the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana, has actually extended the scheme recently, but as per this report, government is no longer in the mood to give the further extension to this scheme in the second half of the upcoming financial year, that is after the month of October. Government has also begun on the cash transfers. So as far as indirect subsidies are concerned, as far as subsidies for the minimum support price, for the public distribution system, or even for the fertilizer is concerned, government is looking to provide more cash transfers, as we have seen in the case of Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi, where 6,000 annually is being transferred to the accounts of farmers. Government is also gradually shifting away from the subsidies, and this would help it to meet the targets under Fiscal Responsibility and Budgetary Management Act 2003. Under this act, government have to bring down the overall fiscal deficit as well as the revenue deficit in a phased manner. Until and unless government control one of its highest expenditure, that is the expenditure on subsidy, meeting the targets on fiscal deficit and revenue deficit looks like a distant dream. And if government go on with the reduction of the subsidy bill, it will help India to meet the World Trade Organization targets on the agreement on agriculture. As India is one of the country which does not meet all the criteria under amber box, green box, as well as the blue box subsidy under the agreement on agriculture. Although India, being the developing country, has the extension being provided and the waiver being provided, but giving the food subsidies, giving the subsidies under MSP brings kind of distortion in the international trade for India and for other WTO members. Reducing down the food subsidy will definitely help India to meet its target. Now let's talk about the basics first. What is a subsidy? Subsidy is a transfer of money. Please understand this, it is a transfer of money. Always money will be involved in case of subsidy. And here there are two parties. Party 1 is the government and party 2 is the non-government entity. It could be a private organization, it could be an individual, or it could be an NGO. It could be any other entity, but it is not the government itself. Central government providing money to the state government is not subsidy. So, transfer of money from the government to any other entity, which ultimately leads to the reduction in the price, is called a subsidy. And that product is the subsidized product. If subsidy does not lead into the fall of the price of a product, it is not going to be classified under its original definition. Now let us take an example. Let's say there was a product which cost rupee 100 in the market. The cost price of the product, let's say, is rupees 80, and it also includes the margin of the manufacturer, which is rupee 20, because every businessman will like to keep some margin for his profit. In the market, let's say the people are not able to pay the 100 rupee price because it is expensive for them. Let's say this is 100 rupees a kg of rice. Now people are not able to pay this price. So what they will do? They will ask the representative government to take some initiative. Now what government will do? Government is not looking into the margin of the producer. So what they will do? They will provide a subsidy, let's say 10 rupees, 20 rupees on the cost price, the production cost. Let's say they have provided a subsidy of rupees 20 on this. It simply means that cost of production to the producer will now fall by 20 rupees. So what it will? It will become 60 rupees in the market. And ultimately, after adding up the margin of the producer, the final price would be 80 rupees. That is now affordable to the larger masses. So this is how the concept of subsidy works. In the UPSC syllabus, you will find direct and indirect subsidies. Direct subsidies are the cash transfers through the mean of direct money. Now direct money here simply means directly from the government to the entity, from party 1 to party 2. Now this direct money, as we have discussed previously, if there is no money, there is no subsidy. So, direct farm subsidy means the transfer of cash in the money form to help the farmer to buy inputs. See, farm subsidy is always paid to the farmer, not to the companies. And these direct farm subsidies are for the farmer to buy inputs. Although it is not the complete Although it is not a thumb rule that whatever money is given to the farmer should and must be spent on the inputs. It might be the other case around. Farmer might spend his own money in buying inputs, and when subsidy comes to his pocket, he might spend the same subsidy for other consumer products. Then comes the indirect farm subsidy. Indirect means where all the real transfers are made. That is, government is not going to pay money to the farmer directly. What they will do? They will reduce down the cost of inputs. Let's say seeds, irrigation, fertilizers, or even the transportation cost. They might even reduce down the storage cost for the farmer. They also give subsidy for the power, the electricity used by the farmer. They might also provide the subsidy on the particular market fee. So it might be anything rather than the direct cash transfer. And all this is done to provide the sustainable farming activities to the farmer. The issue is that indirect farm subsidies are surrounded by ample difficulties, problems, and challenges. In India, food and fertilizer subsidies account for 1/8 of India's total budget spendings, that is, public expenditure. All the subsidies that are provided can be grouped into 5 top headings: food, fertilizers, interest subsidy, fuel, and other subsidies. And they are in the decreasing order. That is, food subsidy is the highest in the accounts. It is followed by fertilizer, where urea subsidy is more than the nutrient-based subsidy. Now let's come to the real problems and the challenges that India is facing with respect to subsidies. The first one is the market distortion. That subsidies create market distortion. Now, what is a market distortion? Please understand that clearly. So under market distortion, the supply and demand and the price does not matches equally. Let's say the demand of a product is at 10 rupee. The supply of the product is at 12 rupee. Now the consumer is likely to pay 10 rupees. The supplier, the producer is likely to take 12 rupees. So this is market distortion. It is not the right price of that product. Now, these are the issues that are being created because of the subsidy. The first sector where this issue is found is the power subsidy. Whenever power subsidy is being provided to the discoms or the distribution companies of the electric power, they are seen to be already debt-ridden. Most of the discoms across India are under severe debt. And because of their higher debt, whatever subsidy is being provided to them, it goes away in the repayments of the debt. And they are not able to provide or generate more electricity. They are not able to generate profits to make further investment. Once these discoms are already under stress, provision of subsidy or cross-subsidization goes in futile. And that is the reason why they are unable to provide 24/7 power supply. Then comes the market distortion under the MSP or the minimum support price. Once more MSP is provided, it leads to the non-diversification of crop or the monocropping. Assume this. If a farmer is being provided more MSP for wheat or rice, do you believe that this farmer is going to spend more time in bringing more crops on his field? No. He is not going to go for the cropping of pulses, for the cropping of corn, for the cropping of, let's say, millets. He will grow only that crop where MSP is high. So he will follow the monocropping, which is not good for the environment. So there will be the distortion of the demand and supply of agriculture goods, and also leads to the wastage of the resources. So here also there will be more supply and less demand. Then comes the fertilizer sector. It will lead to the misuse and the overuse of urea and the black marketing of the underused product, again creating demand and supply issues. And the last is the market distortion in the case of railways. We are taking examples outside the agriculture sector in order to make it easy for you to understand how the concept of subsidy actually goes against the economic principle of market equality. In the railway sector, if more subsidy is provided on the price of tickets, creating low fare prices, What it will do? Railways will end up in losses. There will be less profit. Less profit simply means that railway is not going to invest on the new technologies. Then comes the regressiveness. Subsidies are called to be regressive and not progressive. Why regressive? Let's say if there is a universal provision to provide subsidy, every farmer, whether he is rich or poor, whether he belongs to the richest farmers community from Punjab or the poorest farmer community from East India, as all of them are getting subsidy, they will transfer more benefits to the rich than to the poor. Then comes the governance issue of subsidy. There are inclusion and exclusion error, as we have seen in the case of Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi, where large number of farmers were not included in the provision of cash transfers, or there were millions who were excluded despite being eligible for the scheme. There are duplicate and the ghost beneficiaries which are taking the advantage of the subsidies and the lower prices despite being able to pay the higher prices. There is a presence of middlemen which causes the pilferage of the subsidies, especially in the case of public distribution system. Poor administrative reforms are there, lack of technological advancement. Even if there is a technological advancement, there is large number of glitches. And there is low level corruption. Low level corruption here means that the lower bureaucracy. So the lower strata of bureaucracy, which are normally residing in the rural areas, is found to be more indulgent in the problem of creating subsidy issues. For example, according to the economic survey, 45% of the leakage is seen in the public distribution system in India. And the last one is the adverse impact on the economy. As far as agriculture is concerned, so 8% subsidy is higher than the 3% of public investment. We'll come back to the debate later on. Subsidy creates non-inclusive, environmentally unsustainable, because more subsidy given to the water, let's say water is cheaper, they will spend more water on the field, they will go for rice and sugarcane agriculture. It also creates imbalance in the fertilizer consumption, more urea is used, soil gets degraded because of the excessive chemical fertilization. In terms of banking sector, more subsidy leads to the loan waivers from the political parties. Loan waivers affect the credit culture of the bank. Failure to pay back the loans create non-performing assets in the banking sector, ultimately hurting the overall credit worthiness in the country. In terms of power sector, as we have discussed previously, poor financial positions of DISCOM further raises the NPA, which ultimately affect the banking sector. And at the macro level, higher expenditure on the subsidies given by the government leads to the higher fiscal deficit and the lower capital expenditure. See, there is a resource crunch which is the base of economic studies. Resource crunch is the criteria for the budgeting. Why do we need a budget? Why do government need to create a budget annually? Because they have limited monetary resources. If they have 100 rupees, they have to keep in mind that the money goes in the right direction. If more money is going into the subsidies, less money will be available for the capital expenditure or to create resources in the country that can help in the long-term growth. Higher subsidies leading to the fiscal deficit, ultimately leading to the lower capital expenditure, hurt the economic growth in the long term. Now coming to the debate. Which is better, subsidy or public expenditure? When it comes to the subsidy, so we have MSP, we have fertilizers, we have power, water, loan waiver and many other subsidies. But when it comes to the public expenditure on irrigation, let's say multi-purpose project, marketing infrastructure, creating mandis, local markets, roads, research and development, mechanization, electronic or digital marketing, like we have National Agriculture Market, which is electronically based. All these are the part of public expenditure. When we call for subsidy, it is exclusionary. Some are included, some are not. It is environmentally unsustainable. Water pollution, soil pollution, falling cropping pattern, monocropping and many others. And it does not addresses the structural problem. No matter how much subsidy is being paid by the government to the people, to the farmer, it is never going to create roads in the village. It is never going to create the mechanization of agriculture. It is not going to create the local infrastructure in terms of marketing. But when we shift towards the public investment, it pushes up the GDP. More investment means more GDP. It creates capital assets, long-term capital assets, let's say a local market. Long-term agenda of growth is met. It generates the employment. Now this is very important. Providing MSP subsidy to a farmer is not going to create employment in long term. It might create an employment for short term. But if this subsidy is being going into the corrupt practices, if this subsidy is being misused, that employment generation go nullified. Now let's talk about the subsidies with agriculture as the core area. Till now we have talked about the important issues of subsidies in various areas. Now let's focus to the agriculture. So this is a circular motion which impacts the overall subsidy regime in India. So the first is that subsidy, let's say MSP, being provided to the farmer, it encourages the production of environmentally unsustainable crop. For example, rice or sugarcane. Now both these crops require very large quantity of water. India going through the dark zones, erratic monsoon and the falling water table does not allow for the growing of rice and sugarcane. And on the other hand, the crops which are more nutritious like millets or pulses are grossly neglected. Now what does this lead to? It prevents the agriculture diversification, so there is more monocropping. This ultimately leads to the mismatch in the productions. Industry is required to have more diversified crops. There is demand and supply mismatch, so there are market distortion. Lower prices of certain crops, let's say rice, wheat, sugarcane, and inflation in the other crop, let's say pulses or oil seeds. So oil seeds in India are extremely expensive. Pulses are also expensive in comparison to rice and wheat. So this has created market distortion. Ultimately, it leads to the lower income to the farmer because now farmer is earning and income of the farmer is based on the whims and fancies of a political party under MSP. Farmers' income is not sustainable. They go through droughts each year. They go through floods each year. And the failure of crops has ultimately led to the falling in the farmer income and sometimes even leading to the drastic end of farmers' suicide. Once this becomes a macro issue, political parties take the advantage of that and go up with increasing the MSP to a larger extent in the next coming session. And this becomes a year-long cycle, one after the other, impacting the overall agriculture to a larger extent. Now the question is, should subsidy be allowed or should subsidy be removed altogether? The answer to this question would be gradual phasing out and not the complete phase out. And this phasing out should be targeted toward the indirect subsidies rather than the direct one. Why? India is a welfare nation. They have the welfareist approach. And this welfareist approach also look into the welfare of farmers. We cannot assume that each farmer is now misusing the subsidy being provided. There are millions of farmers who are actually benefiting from the subsidy being provided in the agriculture sector, irrespective of what World Trade Organization rules has to say. The second way forward is that other two alternative routes should be explored. Public expenditure should be increased. MG Narega is the best scheme that can be utilized over here. And direct cash transfer, for example, PM Kisan, should continue in the years to come. Next comes that direct cash transfer should be subjective and not universal. Why should we provide cash transfer to the rich farmers? Government can reduce down the cash transfer to the very rich farmers, that is the farmers who are earning year long, and use that money to subsidize more the poor farmers. The cash transfer that farmers are receiving can be linked to the consumer price index of rural area. This will help the farmer to get the increased cash transfer year on year instead of getting the same payment across many years. Minimum support price could now be diversified. More infrastructure development is required to incorporate other crops. For example, cold storage. So more cold storage will help the farmer to grow those crops which are more perishable. These cold storage will help the horticulture sector and will help in the diversification of the agriculture overall, reducing down the burden on the MSP. And the last way forward could be that we need to shift our focus more towards organic farming in order to reduce down the requirement of chemical fertilizers. With this discussion placed, now we come to a practice question based on the discussion. The practice question says that agricultural subsidies have become an issue on its own. Identify why indirect subsidies are not sustainable. So you have to identify, first of all, you have to justify why it is an issue. Then you have to identify that why these indirect, see the word is indirect, please be careful of that. Why indirect subsidies are not sustainable in long term. Then the third point is that how this issue can be resolved. So here you have to provide way forward. Try to answer this question in 250 words. With the discussion place, let us now move to the next article for the day. This article of the Hindi newspaper talks about the bauxite mining and its permanent cancellation call in the state of Odisha. Now, as far as controversy is concerned, so there is a NGO, it's a forum with the name Mali Parvat Surkhya Samiti. It is located in the Koraput district of Odisha, that is southern Odisha, and they are demanding the cancellation of Mali Parvat bauxite mining lease. Now, why they are demanding so? The reason is that there are issues of environment clearance being misused. According to the companies that have been mining the bauxite in the locality, the environmental clearance are straightforward and there is no issue or there is no hindrance to the environment. There is no environmental damage if the bauxite mining is continued. But according to the villager, the environmental clearance is misleading because there are number of perennial streams, river streams that are going through those environmentally sensitive areas on which most of the villages are now sustaining. If the mining or the illegal mining continues, because the license of the mining ended in 2011 itself, if the illegal mining continues, the villagers are going to lose on the sustainability of the environment and the important water resources. Now, going beyond the controversy, bauxite reserves and the location of industries of aluminium is important for your UPSC preparation. In your GS paper 1, in the mains examination, location or the factors affecting the location of an industry is important. In prelim examination, location of bauxite regions are important. So as far as bauxite is concerned, as you know, bauxite is an ore to the aluminium. India has around 10% of the world's bauxite reserves and it is the prime ore of aluminium. Aluminium is the most abundant metal found on the earth crust. Odisha alone accounts for 51% of India's aluminium reserve. So this fact should be clear. It is followed by Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Jharkhand, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh combined. Most of India's bauxite is found in the east coast bauxite deposits. In the previous year, as far as industrial location is concerned or the resource-based manufacturing is concerned, so in 2019 a question was asked with respect to the resource-based manufacturing in the mains examination GS paper 1. In 2017, petroleum refineries and their location related question have been asked, and beyond this number of other questions have been asked with respect to the resource location and industrial setup. So as far as aluminium industry is concerned, why it is located to a particular location? The first is that the location of an industry forming the aluminium requires basic raw material, that is bauxite, caustic soda and the aluminium fluoride. All these resources, if are available in the locality, that is going to benefit the industry in terms of cost of production. If the resources are located in the nearby area, cost of production will be low and profit would be higher. Electricity is required as the continuous source. Thousands of kilowatt of energy is required for aluminium smelting plants. And comes the effective transportation to carry the huge weight. So creating an industry where transportation is weak, where road network is poor, is not the criteria for the aluminium industry to be located. And industrial clusters have to serve the immediate market. If India does not have a market for aluminium, why India would go for aluminium industry? So proximity, electricity, transportation and market location are the four factors that determine where aluminium industry is going to be located. Now comes the aluminium related issue. India, despite having very large resource, still imports aluminium from China, US and Netherlands. The reason being simple. Despite being the abundant resources, most of the resources remain untapped by companies. And the biggest reason here is the electricity. The issues of aluminium industry on the other hand are straightforward. There are very few handful companies which are involved in the production of aluminium, and most of them are in the public sector. Balco, Hindalco and Nalco are three top players. The rising cost of domestic production due to the increasing in the energy cost. As we have said, electricity is the most important factor of the location of this industry. So higher electricity cost, coal cess, because coal is used for production of the electricity as well as the energy resources, rising cost is an hindrance. There's an over-reliance on the import of coal, scrap material as well as the strategic metal for the production. Administrative issues like there's a delay in the environmental clearance, which is part of today's article. Complex laws and frequent changes in the policies. Policy changes as the government changes the power. And the last one is aluminium is very important industry due to its lightweight nature. Most of the aluminium is used for the production of transportation vehicles, including the cars and other automobiles. As the demand of automobile industry is increasing, hence the imports of aluminium is surpassing the domestic production, and that creates the issue for the Indian industry at large. So when we talk about the location, as you can see, these are the important areas where bauxite mines are located. So if we go through the map, we can find that important region includes Koraput, which was mentioned in the article. Then we have Sambalpur, Sundargarh, Bilaspur, Durg, Daltonganj, and all these are on the eastern side of India. They are very, very important sites. Apart from that, Gujarat, Maharashtra, and even to the larger extent, Kerala and Tamil Nadu along with Andhra Pradesh also produces the bauxites. But when it comes to the location of the industries, they are very, very selective. As you can see, majority of the plants are situated on the eastern front, including Renukut in Uttar Pradesh, Korba in Chhattisgarh, Hirakund and Angul in Odisha, Metur in Tamil Nadu and Alupuram in Kerala. Why they are locally situated? Because of the factors that we have talked about in the article itself. With this discussion, please, let us now move to the next article for the day. This article of the Hindu newspaper appeared on page 1 and talks about an important observation made by the Constitutional Bench, which include 5 judges from the Supreme Court, that there is no need for extra curb or control on the free speech of ministers. Now, it has been seen that most of the time certain ministers in the government at the center or at the state level make certain statement which may hurt the sentiments of the people or which may hurt the sentiments of the opposition party. Now, based on the observation, Supreme Court has stated that there is no need to bring more control on the freedom of speech of the ministers in the House. Supreme Court has held that there is no reason to impose any additional restrictions because already there are certain restrictions which are mentioned in the Article 19 of the Indian Constitution under Clause 2 for freedom of speech and expression through restrictions. And government is not vicariously liable for disparaging remarks made by them. So even if a government minister speaks certain things on a certain platform, government itself is not liable to be punished for that. We cannot hold the collective responsibility of Council of Ministers to punish that particular member. Let's say there are 10 members in Council of Ministers in a particular government. And out of them, 2 members or 2 ministers made a particular derogatory comment outside the house in their personal capacity. Now, can government be punished? Can this entire Council of Ministers be punished for what these 2 ministers have done? Or even if they have spoken certain thing inside the house, they are actually enjoying the freedom of speech and expression as per Article 88 of the Constitution. So today, in this discussion, we are going to read into the judgment made by the Supreme Court. We will analyze what majority and minority judges have to say in this judgment. What is vicarious liability mean in the judgment? What is the basic constitutional provisions for Council of Ministers, Chief Minister, Council of Minister at the state level, and the Prime Minister has to say. So it is more a current and a static discussion ahead for you. So as per the Supreme Court, government cannot be held liable for any additional restrictions made on the speech of a particular minister. They say that government is not vicariously liable for the remarks made by such ministers. Now, what is vicarious liability? It is a situation in which one party is held partly responsible for the unlawful action of the third party. Means that if a child has committed something, it is the parents who are being held responsible. So child being one party and parents being the third party, and the second party here being the one who is punishing. So if Council of Ministers is making any mistake, the entire government cannot be punished. So as per Article 88, Council of Ministers and the Attorney General of India have certain rights. Now please pay attention to this. First right is right to speak. The second is that they can take part in the proceeding of either house, whether Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. They can also take participation in the joint sitting of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. They can be member of any committee of the parliament, but they cannot vote in certain instances of that committee. So, right to speak itself is a constitutional right. I repeat, right to speak of a minister is a constitutional right in that particular house of the parliament. So, based on that right, they can have or enjoy the freedom of speech until and unless they are following the reasonable restrictions made under Article 19(2), where national security, dignity, defamation and others are included. So if they are not violating 19(2), they have right to speak anything. And there is no requirement of bring any kind of controls or curbs on these people. This is what Supreme Court has to observe. If we go by the judgment, this is what the majority of the judges have to say, and this is what the minority judgment has to say. Now, majority says that government cannot be held vicariously responsible. That is, third party cannot be held responsible for the mistakes of the first party. Collective responsibility of the Council of Ministers cannot be evoked in the case of such comments being made by the single minister. Restrictions on freedom of speech of the public functionaries, that is minister, cannot go beyond what is prescribed in Article 19(2). So if they are saying something which is not in the control of Article 19(2), they cannot be held responsible. Additional restrictions not found under Article 92 cannot be imposed. Whatever is under 19(2) should be imposed right forward. And lastly, it is not possible to extend the concept of collective responsibility of any or every statement orally made by the minister. It simply proves that if minister is following the restrictions under 19(2), he or she should not be held responsible, or entire Council of Ministers should not be punished for that action. On the other hand, minority judgment says that statements made by any minister as a delegate of the government, so if he is working or speaking anything on his personal capacity, on his private life, he or she should not be held responsible. But if that minister is acting as a delegate, spokesperson on the behalf of the government, then all such statement can be attributed vicariously for the government itself, and here Council of Ministers can be held responsible. So minority judgment says that all official capacity statements should be brought under control, while the majority says it does not. Now let's talk about the basics from the Constitution. Article 74 of the Indian Constitution states that Council of Ministers, along with the Prime Minister as the head, should aid and advise the President, and this President is going to act on the advice given by such Council of Ministers, except certain exemptions. President may require the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister to reconsider the advice only once. On the other hand, Article 75 talks about all the provisions of Council of Ministers. That is, they are appointed along with the Prime Minister by the President on the advice given by the Prime Minister. Maximum strength should be 15% of the strength of Lok Sabha. Duration of the Council of Ministers is the pleasure of the President subjected to certain conditions. That is, if they are enjoying the majority in the House, President cannot remove them. So over there, pleasure of President does not work. Council of Ministers are collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha. Point is, whatever a single minister is doing, he is representing the entire Council of Ministers. So if on the floor of Lok Sabha, if tomorrow Finance Minister, Home Minister or even Defense Minister is speaking about certain policies of the government, it means the entire Council of Ministers is reflecting the idea of that policy. And the last one is President shall administer oath of office and oath of secrecy. Oath of office means that particular person or member of parliament is now taking the oath of an office which he is joining. Oath of secrecy means that he is not going to release out the important and sensitive information outside. This oath is mentioned under the third schedule of the Indian Constitution. Now let's compare the Prime Minister to the Chief Minister. Prime Minister is appointed by the President, Chief Minister by the Governor. President appoints other minister on the advice of PM. Here also, Governor appoints the other minister on the advice of Chief Minister. Oath here is administered by President, here by the Governor. He holds the office to the pleasure of the President, here to the pleasure of Governor. But as we have discussed previously, pleasure of the President is subjected to certain conditions, and the most important condition is if they are enjoying the majority in the particular house, they cannot be removed by the President or the Governor respectively.